We're starting our program today with Gun Landwehr, who was a hospice nurse, and she's going to talk to us really about the dying process. Gun?
Yes, okay, so my name is Gun Landwehr, and yes, I am a member of the village. So people, you have my home phone number in the roster, so if you have need to, you can always call me.
Well,
But I'd like to do, so I'm here, I'm not gonna go anywhere, not yet, not yet, I hope. And so let me just recap a little bit what hospice is. It is a doctor's order for patients that the doctors believe might have 6 months or so left to live. However, doctors are not always correct. So some people live much longer and they can stay on hospice longer than 6 months. Also, some people don't qualify to stay on hospice and they sort of graduate from hospice. We might see them later on in the future, but so it's not a total death sentence that people always kind of assume. But the hospice is a doctor's order. It is free because Medicare has a hospice benefit. So hospice should be a free service. We are a team. So there is a nurse, an RN usually, and a medical social worker, home health aides, wonderful, wonderful volunteers, spiritual care providers. They used to be called chaplains, but not every person is, quote, religious, but everybody is a spirit. So they're spiritual care providers, and also bereavement counselors. So I worked as a hospice nurse for 15 years until my own husband died. And then me and many other hospice nurses, that's the time when we leave. We retire or quit. But my husband wasn't even on hospice. He had a heart attack. So, but what we do, what happens as the patient gets closer to dying and is on hospice, we spend a lot of time educating the families, the caregivers. We have doctor's orders for the patient. The main goal is, of course, to keep the patient comfortable. So I usually say that hospice middle name is comfort. We really don't want people to have any pain. And we know, especially men are very stoic and things. And we tell them, you have to be honest with us about pain, not just say it doesn't hurt. If something hurts, and we explain people can have many different pains in different parts of the body. So we want absolute truth from our patients. And sometimes the nurses will need to have the medical social worker will go out with us to home visits so that we can actually talk to the patient without the caregiver always speaking for the patient. Mm-hmm. So that's something to think about. That is so easy that once you're the caregiver, you know everything and you know all the answers, but we actually need to talk to the patient, it herself or himself. But again, it's a teamwork. So as the patient gets closer to death, we do make home visits. Nurses make home visits 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're always available for home visits. We also have a what we called a little medicine bag that we send out to all the patients, and that we can instruct the families if a new symptom appears, that we can tell them to go to this bag, and we instruct them which medication to take out so that they can give the patient the first dose while we're driving to the home. And the drive, depending on traffic and nighttime, what have you, Usually by the time we get to the home, the patient is comfortable again. But again, there's a lot of teaching involved with the family and the caregivers. So what actually happens when the patient dies, it is usually the breathing stops, and that's how you can tell. And the families will normally call us. And many times when the patient dies, the nurse is in the home. If the nurse isn't there, the family is instructed to call us. We do come out and make the home visit and pronounce death. And this is something that we are licensed and certified to do. We are agents of the doctors. So yes, the nurse pronounces death and notes the time is when we pronounce is the death time. And then we talk to the family, and of course we hug the families, we express, our condolences and all of that. But the first phone call we will do or to make is to call the funeral home, providing the family already has, or the patient or the family has picked a funeral home. Sometimes we come out and the family is looking through the yellow pages, trying to find a funeral home. And so we do call the funeral home. We ask the family if they are ready for the funeral home to come. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they say yes. Other times they will tell us, no, we would like more family members to come and say their goodbyes here. So could the funeral home come, if this is in the middle of the night, can they come like at 10 o'clock in the morning? And we say, no problems. We will call the funeral home to tell them to either come now or come at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's a family's choice when they want the funeral home to come. And while we're waiting for the funeral home, we do some more explaining about what to expect when the funeral home arrives. But Mr. Pasalacqua explained a lot of that last week, but we tell the family what to sort of expect. Then other calls that we make will be to call the doctor's office. If it's at night, we'll leave a message to tell the doctor that this patient had died and at what time. And normally we thank the doctor for his care and service to the patient. Then we will also leave an all staff message so that everybody on the team, all the people that need to know that this particular patient has died. We will also call the pharmacy to notify them so that no new medications or refills will be sent out. So they will be aware. And if it's at night, of course, we leave messages. Then we also call what is called the DME companies, the ones that provide the durable medical equipment. Because at the start, and that's part of the free hospice, is that we will provide the hospital bed, an electric, or with some families we joke, say that it's a Niagara bed. Remember the old commercials about the Niagara bed? You could watch TV very well because it can rise up. And also, so they'll come and pick up the hospital bed, oxygen tanks and concentrator, wheelchairs over the bed tables, bedside commodes, any equipment that we have ordered and is out there. And also we will check with the family when a convenient time is for them to come and pick up the stuff. And the driver will always call ahead of time to make sure somebody is home. The funeral home normally will, come and remove the body, and then they will leave their business card and tell them that they will call the next day to set up the appointment for the family to come in. The other thing, that the nurses will do, we have to dispose of some medications. And how that is done has changed over the years. But there are certain medications we have to dispose of, and a family member or somebody in the house has to witness the disposal and sign for it.
Mhm.
And of course, it's certain kinds of medications, not all of them, but some that we have to. So that is pretty much what we do at the death call.
Mhm.
And then we usually wait with the family until the funeral home has come there.
So Gun, would you talk a little bit about how the patient changes color or what in the dying process?
Normally it's very peaceful. Usually not only cancer patients, but most of our patients will stop eating because they don't feel good from eating. Some people want them to start having IVs to, fluids. And at that point, we have to explain that putting a load of liquid into will simply kill off the heart, because the heart is not geared for an influx of fluids at that point. So normally is that people will start sleeping more. They're eating less, sleeping more, and usually you said, and then you can start telling the breathing. We have, not all the time, but many times, periods of apnea. That is the cessation of breathing. It's like the body doesn't know how to die. It's never really died before. The body is geared for living. It knows how to live. Now something has happened and the body is a little confused. So it's like it knows that the heart, the lungs, and the brain are the most important things for survival. That's why food, the digestion, isn't important anymore. They really feel sick from eating. And so it's just like everything slows down, and they're sort of getting to be less responsive. And then eventually they're not responsive at all, but they're sleeping, but the breathing, these periods of apnea. And normally the people have lost weight, and it's very easy to see the chest rise and go down and rise and then stop. And we explain this beforehand so that families don't really get too scared, because it's normal. And it's like the body is practicing dying by not breathing. And these episodes start off with just a few seconds, 5, 10, 15. They can go 2 minutes between breaths. So but then it's just like you never quite know if that was the last breath or not until they don't breathe anymore. So it's very peaceful, and some people have a smile on their face and they look relaxed. And one thing to remember is that hearing is the last sense to go. Even if they're not responding, they hear. So you can talk to a patient. Even if they're not responding, they hear until they have died.
Uh-huh. And so that each of the senses go, is that right? The different senses?
Well, yes, because they don't open their eyes very much more.
Yes.
We continue, if they've had pain, we continue with the pain medications. And even if they're nonverbal, you can tell if somebody has pain. If they grimace,
yes,
if they clench their teeth or jaws and their, hands are in fist, I mean, then, they don't have to say they're in pain. You can tell.
And you didn't mention, but isn't it right that you discontinue treatment in hospice? I mean, you're treating for pain to make someone comfortable, but you're not treating to, you don't continue the treatment plan.
No. Medicare, if somebody is want to be cured and is on various treatments like chemotherapy or radiation or immunotherapy, no, because Medicare is not paying for both hospital and treatment and hospice. So no, but there can be treatment to alleviate pain. If somebody has bone cancer,
Right.
which can be very painful,
Yeah.
then they can get radiation to the pain area, but it's not a cure. It is for palliative reasons, for pain control.
I read in a book, I didn't know this, but this is one of the things that I thought it's important for people to know. When my mother died, I thought, well, gosh, I got to get her out of the room. We got to leave. And I read that it's typical that there might be 4 hours in a hospital before the patient is removed. So that would have been an important thing for me to understand. I felt like, okay, she died. I better depart. And
No, with hospice, the family, I remember one case we had that the patient belonged to a certain religious section of some religion, and they wanted the body to remain in the house for 3 days.
Yeah.
This was in the summertime, high up in Napa Valley, and we checked with public health, and things, but we fixed that by having the dry ice company in Napa. They were willing to be called anytime the patient died and meet the family or somebody, and they would give them enough dry ice depending on the temperature and where to place it and things, so that the patient could remain in the house for 3 days. But that is unusual. But again, hospice, you have to be creative and work with the family and what they want and what's important.
Right.
Absolutely.
But I gathered from what I read that there's usually a few hours in the hospital that you would have to be able to stay with your loved one. And I wish I'd known that. One of the other things that when my mother died, which she just died a few years ago, I had heard, I was spending all the time with her in the hospital. And I had heard that often people don't want to die because they feel responsible for their loved ones. So I got up one morning in the hospital with my mom, and I talked to her at her bedside, and I said, Mom, I'm doing fine. We're all doing fine. If you want to rest now and go on, I said, I'll be right back. I'm just walking down the hall. I walked down the hall, and as I turned around to come back, the nurse was coming toward me, and I said, my mother just died, didn't she? And so, I often think about that. I was so conservative, speaking, I said earlier, gosh, had I known, I would have crawled in the bed with my mother and had that physical contact. But I thought I was trying to be appropriate.
Well,
does anyone have any questions of Gun before, because we're going to shift gears and go on and talk about the responsibilities after death? Does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Okay, Constance?
Well, number one could not have a better neighbor than Gun. I'm lucky that she lives right across the street.
Yes.
And I've seen Gun in action when our beloved neighbor Sue was dying. Gun was there at the bedside and just doing all the wonderful right things. But one thing that I learned was through another friend who suggested, as my sister no longer could take in any food or liquid, the ice chips, but that we know, but not just ice chips, but to flavor them a little bit, maybe just to give a little variety. And
That's
that
great to
helped
know.
things. And the other thing, again, not at the actual dying process, but in the process overall, doing little micro massages just to let them feel within their own body. And then the other thing that I learned from hospice in Minnesota was that the extremities often would turn bluish. And that was another sign that the body was ready to go.
Oh, yes, yes, I've read that. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add something, or Gun, did you want to?
Yeah, just to say that a hospice patient normally do not die in the hospitals, because again, Medicare will not pay for somebody to be in the hospital and on hospice. So the hospice deaths occur at home, wherever that patient's home is. It can be at the veterans home, it can be in a nursing home, boarding care, granddaughter's house, homeless in somebody's car. I mean, so it's not in the hospital. And yes, so we don't have the 4-hour requirement.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to comment, if you are in the hospital, that you have some time to be with your loved one. You don't need to be racing out of there.
Oh, no.
Mimi?
Yes, and absolutely hospice families, yes, grandkids that can crawl into bed with a grandmother.
Yeah, right.
And also the other thing is that when somebody dies at home on hospice, coroner is not called. The only one going out is the hospice nurse. So there's no police, there is no, because it is kind of expected that the patient will die or could die.
Okay. Thank you, Gun. Mimi?
Yeah, this is my sister. She had a question.
Oh, okay. Hi.
I'm Nancy, and I've been a caretaker for many people. And I thought it's interesting to me that hospice had such an accurate picture of what happens. You talked about the breathing at the end, but there's in the beginning when things start to go down, you know, that they say a week you can figure this, and in 2 weeks you could figure, you know, and could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, because we also give the families a sheet that basically gives a list of some common symptoms and signs of decline and getting closer to death. And it's a 2-page pamphlet. And we explain that not all patients get all the symptoms, nor do they get them in the sequence they're listed. But it is something to be, I like to give earlier when they come on hospice, just to have the family prepared. But again, they can call in with any, and we instruct them to, I always say, I'm not psychic. So I don't know if a patient has new symptoms, if they're now agitated, or if they have increased pain, but call us. Call us with any questions, any concerns. We will talk you through, we'll make home visit, because we know that we can keep the patients quite comfortable. But the family is where we spend a lot of our time teaching, training, explaining.
Thank you. And Nancy, thank you for your comment and question. Pat?
I wanted to say that we just went through a hospice experience with Greg's mother. She passed away in October.
Can you speak a little louder?
Yes, I don't know why our speaker isn't quite good enough. We just went through a hospice experience with Greg's mother. She passed away in October, and she was on hospice at a nursing home. And one of the things, and one additional thing that wasn't mentioned that I thought was lovely, was that they offered to help Greg through the experience. And even after the death, they contacted us a few times. How are you doing? would you like some counseling? You know, blah, blah, blah. I thought that was lovely.
Yeah.
He didn't take up on it, but I thought that was, that's something I didn't know that hospice did.
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
that's why I mentioned we do have bereavement counselors, and yes, they follow the family for a year after the death.
Wow.
Initially, more often, there are groups that get together. There's individual counseling, absolutely. And also, if there are young children in the household, you know, then we could send out the bereavement counselors earlier to talk to the children. So yeah, no, there's lots and lots and lots of things that hospice can do.
What a fabulous service.
And it's free.
And it's a free fabulous service. That's wonderful.
You've paid to Medicare, so it's covered.
Yeah. Any other questions before we move on? Okay.
Thank you.
So we're going to shift gears and talk about, oh, did someone have something else? No. Shift gears and talk about, then there's a book that, let me see if I can show it to you. Let's see if can you see that?
Yeah, I'm dead.
I'm dead. Okay.
I'm dead, now what? This is a book that it's a fill in the blanks where you put every piece of information about your life that someone might want to know. It's like personal, medical, my dependents, key contacts, on and on and on, financial information, business information. But I was definitely intrigued with the title, I'm Dead, Now What? Maybe I'll show you while I'm here. The last things we talked about, that was Libby Boatwright, who spoke with us. This is a great little book. It is $16.95. And this one is called A Beginner's Guide to the End. It's written by a fabulous doctor, B.J. Miller, and a woman who's a writer. She must have helped him with the writing. But needless to say, it's pretty thick. And Al Pluchok drew on this when he came to us, and his comment was, everyone should read this book. And this one is $20. I have a couple copies of each of these books. Should you ever want to borrow them, just give me a call or send an email because they're right there and they're available. Okay, so we're going to shift gears and focus on what needs to be tended to after someone dies. Gun talked about some of the immediate things that need to be taken care of, but there are other things as well. So Mary Frances and Mary Keentz, are you here?
I'm here.
Okay.
I don't see Mary Frances.
Oh my gosh. Well, we'll see if, my goodness, what happened to Mary Frances? We'll see if she just got delayed.
Judy, I'll give her a call.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Okay. So I have a few questions that I had that I wanted to start off with and ask everyone. And my first one was, did you feel that you were prepared in the event that your husband died? And what I meant by that was your paperwork in order. Had you discussed things between you about what you would prefer when you died? So Mary Keentz, could you answer that from your experience?
Yes, we were well prepared. When we still lived in Wisconsin, we had our wills and powers of attorney and everything that goes with it done by an attorney. And we had showed everything to our sons during family visits. We knew that Marty had a vulnerable heart. His dad had, but he still lived 20 years longer than his dad, who died of a sudden heart attack. We came to what we had done is we had sold our home And so we lived in an apartment. We got rid of all our own stuff that was excess. We moved to Wisconsin to be near our son. And so when we got here, we got the book from Kaiser that you fill out about, that they want you to fill out for your death wishes and all that kind of stuff. We have filled that out. I went with Marty to his medical appointments, particularly with the cardiologist. We went to a 2-hour seminar on heart failure. So we knew it was possible anytime that he could go. And the fact is that since we lived that long, he was 86, we had time to take care of these things. It's not like a sudden death or anything.
Right.
And then what had happened was that the doctor had said, if your heart, he had his blood pressure machine at home. He said, if your heart rate drops suddenly, give us a call right away. Well, that's exactly what happened. The clinic was closed. It was a Friday evening. I called, ambulance, EMTs came. I showed them the medical card and did everything we were supposed to do. And they called an ambulance. We went to the hospital, to Kaiser. They treated one of them, and I was told there that he might not live through the night. So he lasted less than 2 days. And when it was determined that he was not going to recover, they put him into one of the rooms in the hospital where where you just wait for the person to die, and the families can gather and they bring you snacks and there's a cot and stuff like that. So when we came, we had registered, we were Ameriprise customers for decades. We had got a new financial advisor, and she's lent us a book. The title was something like Get Your Affairs in Order So Your Family Won't Have to. That was written by an attorney in Walnut Creek. And we had started to read that and go through it and think about and process everything we'd have to do, because when you get into a new state, you're supposed to write all new documents for a new state. So I was pretty much prepared.
It sounds like it, Mary. I think we're going to need to
Yeah.
move on to get the others.
Uh-huh.
Goon, you want to
Yes.
comment about your experience when your husband died?
Well, because of my training and experience,
Oh.
and I had taken care of him for a while. We were married 42 years. So yes, I could tell when he started declining, and we had the trust. So for me and Constance, no, I was prepared, because I figured if he went on hospice, I would have a bed. We would
Right.
live downstairs in a 2-story house, make it easier. And I mean, so yes, no, I was prepared.
I figured.
And
Okay.
so, yeah, no, so he did have a heart attack, but he did live a few days after. So he actually died at the hospital.
Okay,
And,
thank you.
and I was there, so.
Mary Frances, I asked the question about, did you feel you were prepared in the event that you or your husband would die? And had you talked about what you wanted?
Yes. We had talked about what he wanted. We never talked about what I wanted. But we had talked about what he wanted for years. And the story that happened with my husband was that he fell and hit his head on the sidewalk in December. And he had to have his head stitched up and that kind of thing. And that was really the beginning of the end, but you didn't know it at the time. He also fell again in the house, and he split his head open above his ear and laid on the floor. And I didn't even know anything had happened to him, because I didn't know where he was, because he was wandering around the house. Anyway, he developed pneumonia, and he was put in the hospital on the 6th of January. And we had a discussion about this with the pulmonologist about what was going on. And one of the things that the pulmonologist said to me, that it said to the both of us, was that he didn't know if there were any antibiotics out that could cure what was going on with my husband. And I said, if you cannot cure what's going on with my husband, then discharge my husband home in hospice and let it go that way. And the pulmonologist is half Chinese and half Filipino. And he said to my husband and I, the Chinese don't like to die at home. And so that threw my husband and I sort of in a tither. Anyway, my husband at that point was in the hospital for 12 days, and he came home under home health and under physical therapy and what have you, and he was really getting better. And I asked him at that point, because we had never discussed this part of, I said, where do you want to die? When you die, where do you want to die? Do you want to die in the hospital or do you want to die at home? And I said, culturally, which do you want? And he said, I never heard of what, and he told me that he said the name of the doctor. He said, I never heard of that before. He said, because people in my generation, and my husband was 92, they always died at home. They didn't even die in the hospital. There were very few hospitals available for anything. So anyway, so he was home for 12 days and he developed pneumonia again. And he went into the hospital, back into the hospital, and was being given 4 IV antibiotics at the same time. The last one being vancomycin, which is an old antibiotic that Gun and I both know about, and which I hate because it's so hard on the body. And so what ended up happening was that my stepdaughters didn't want their father to die because of what they hadn't done in all the time after he and their mother were divorced, which was 56 or so years before he's dying. And they talked him into signing up for dialysis.
Oh.
And so I left the hospital on a Sunday night, and he said that the next day he would sign the paperwork for dialysis. Now, this is a man who traveled all over the world and who wandered around, and who, if I'd let him, would still be driving his car and going grocery shopping and doing whatever it is that he wanted to do. So I came in on a Monday morning, and he said to me, I didn't sign the dialysis papers. I'm not going to sign them. And I said, I thought you wanted to go to your grandson's graduation from high school. And he said to me, it's futile.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, you can come home, but I have to make arrangements for hospice, so you cannot come home today. So I had to come home, and I had to move furniture all by myself, heavy furniture, to be able to get a hospital bed into the library where he and I spent many a morning in this house. And so I met with the hospice people. I had my stepdaughter, who was down, meet with the hospice people. And then after she left, after the hospice nurse left, all hell broke loose. They were yelling at me. They were telling me to cancel it, that they didn't want this to happen now, that he couldn't go on hospice. And it went on like this. And so the next day he came home. And now meanwhile, this is a man who knows what's going on and what he wants. And on top of that, if he can't do it, I have his durable power of attorney for healthcare. So
Yeah.
I'm the one who's going to have to make the decisions based upon what he's been telling me for 52 years.
Mary Frances, we're going to have to move quickly.
Well, let me just tell you just a little bit, is that he came back the next day, he came home the next day, and the hospice nurse asked him where he was, and he said, I'm in Vallejo. And I said, no, you're not. And he looked around and he said, I'm in my house, I'm in my own library. And he signed the papers putting himself in hospice.
Uh-huh. Wow. That's,
The outcome is that one of the stepdaughters is talking to me and the other one is still
Oh,
not talking to me
oh.
2 years later.
oh dear, I'm sorry. And how long, can you just say how long he was in hospice before he passed?
8 days.
Uh-huh. Well, it's
Long
good.
enough to get the services of hospice.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all. So my next question is, after your husband died and you had responsibilities, what took most of your time? Mary, do you want to start?
It was financial. I did not need any legal help, but my financial advisor, whom we'd been seeing, she'd come to the house. She came many, many times to the house, and it was mostly dealing with finances. Now, we had no complexities. We owned no property. We had no debts, didn't even own a car. We lived in an apartment. We had joint credit cards, accounts, and joint bank statements. So we had no complexity. We did not need a trust, and we never had
Mhm.
a trust, because we took care of everything by making sure that all our beneficiary designations were filled out. So there
Mhm.
was nobody involved. So my main need was financial help, and the financial advisor came to the house here many times. And at first, you have to deal with this stuff when you're not operating at full efficiency. I mean, that's to put it mildly. And she finally said one time, I see that you last about 45 minutes. You get decision fatigue. There's so many chores to do, so many things to settle, so all these bits and pieces. And you find that when you deal with banks and companies and utilities, people at the companies don't seem to keep records or talk to each other.
Yeah.
They make mistakes. They're not informed. It's just a lot of frustration, but I had help with the finances.
That's great. Okay, let's see. Goon, how about you?
Well, we were sort of organized. We had, as far as financials, I've learned a long time ago that nobody cares more about your money than you do. So we had learned a lot ourselves. So we actually had 3 checking accounts here in town. I had mine, and he had the power of attorney to it, and he had his with another bank, and I had the power of attorney, I thought. And then we had the joint account.
Mhm.
Because when we got married, I thought, he doesn't need to know how much I spend on his birthday or Christmas. And if he had a model railroad, and if he wanted to buy another engine or whatever, I didn't need to know. So we each had a small account, and then all the bills got paid out of the joint.
That's great.
And then as far as investments, we had opted to go with Vanguard several years ago. And it was very simple. I let them know that he had died, and with the trust, everything got split into, because I have 2 bonus kids.
Uh-huh.
So we had the trust, so that half would go to his kids, half to me. And so they split, Vanguard split everything into 2. So we now have a survivor's trust, that's me, and the bypass trust, that is my husband's money.
Mhm.
No effort on my part except to let them know, and then
Right.
send a copy of the death certificate.
Okay, that's great.
So
Mary Frances, what was the most complex stuff that you've been dealing with?
Finances,
Oh,
getting my husband's pension into my account. And I will tell you that it's 2 years and I'm still dealing with it. The other day, the insurance company decided to cancel all the property insurances that I had, because supposedly my husband owned something in Nationwide. And I had
wow.
paid the insurance. And now I've got the insurance back. But I mean, it's just like, you never know. We had a trust and we thought we had taken care of everything and that it was going to be easy. And it has not been.
My
Sorry
God.
about that,
Awful.
Mary Frances. Oh, yeah.
My goodness. Was there anything you could have done differently?
Not have my son-in-law call me up and ask for $33,000 the day that the states told me they were taking back my husband's pension because he died.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, how am I supposed to pay my house payment?
Well, I'm sorry about this, and I appreciate your raising the complexities that can happen, the human complexities that can happen. I had an experience where that was the case also, and it was not pleasant.
Well, the state really was very nice to deal with. And they told me they were going to take the money back. They took the money back, and then they gave me a pension check and what have you. And so they were really quite empathetic and quite nice to deal with. It was just all this other stuff.
Yeah, yes, I can hear that.
Can I put a
Sure.
little remark in? When my husband died, everything was taken care of ahead of time because he had cancer for 11 months. But my most devastating part, aside from finances, was learning how to grieve. Oh my gosh, that's just overwhelming. It takes a hold of you in the most inopportune times. And you just don't know where it's coming from, and it just hits you between the eyes. And I never could understand that for a long time.
Amen.
Did you have any support?
Oh, I did have support. I have 3 boys, and at the time, 2 boys lived close by, and they came home a lot. My youngest was in college, and he came home a lot, and my other son lived in the same town, and he came over every day practically. So yeah, I had support, but I felt like I needed to be strong for them. So I never really let go.
Yes,
That's what we do. We try to protect our children, and then you forget they're going through their own loss, but because it was their dad.
Yes, I should say.
It's a completely different type of loss. Yeah.
Well, I got to say that's one reason it takes so long to settle estates, because you never know when that grief is going to hit. There are days when you just can't face it. You can't.
Oh, that's so true. So true.
And so it everything is put off. And then you have incompetent people at the other end, and websites that don't work, and people that
I joined a grieving group, and it's not for everybody, but I found it very helpful to me, to the point that I became a facilitator because I learned there were other people out there that had the same feelings as me. I didn't, you think you're all alone, but you're not.
Thank you for sharing that, Margaret.
Yeah. Judy, I wonder if I might make some comments.
Sure.
So I had several things. When my mother died, my mother and my sister decided that they were going to use this really inexpensive tax preparer. And turns out she had a drinking problem.
Oh, God.
And after the taxes were given to her, all the documents, she disappeared with all my mother's tax documents and my sister's tax documents.
Oh my goodness.
And so I thought, to recreate all that, because my mom would have a $20 stock here and a $35 stock there and whatnot. But fortunately, I was working through an attorney's. This is all me going to Minnesota and dealing with all of this. And fortunately, a very strong letter from the attorney, and I even went to her home in Minneapolis and the tax preparer's home, and finally she sent it back with a big apology. So I have learned from that I keep a copy of all my documents before I give them to someone, and even my own tax preparer. So that's just one thing I learned. The other thing, my mother said, you girls don't have to worry about anything. It's all in the green safety deposit box in the closet there. Everything, the will, everything's there. And my mother even said, this is the outfit I want to be buried in. She had it all done. However, when I opened up the green safety deposit box in the closet, it was a will, but it was not signed.
Oh,
dear.
Oh,
And the
no.
her attorney had retired, and his daughter took up the business, but they did not have a copy of the will.
oh my
So that
gosh.
meant my sister had to go through probate. So the whole learning there is check everything and make
Yes,
sure you have
I
a
should
copy of
say.
it. And then
Oh my gosh.
finally, two things that I did. My sister had a million catalogs and magazines that came, as well as a couple credit cards. And so I shamelessly called up and said that I am Roberta Butel and I'm canceling the credit card or whatever. And I canceled all that
Oh
stuff.
my
However, to
gosh.
this date, my dad's been dead for 20 years. I still get mail for my dad and my mother and my sister.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Anyway,
Thank you,
just some
Constance.
ideas there.
Thank you. Mary, could you talk about, you said, I know that you talked about some complexities in getting Marty's name off accounts and so on.
The dealing with the utilities is something there were two of the utilities are finally in my name, but the worst one was Comcast. My notes from my dealing with them are almost 2 pages long, back and forth. My account being locked, the website didn't work. They had me on the phone with tech support for 45 minutes with me with my cell phone in one hand and the computer in the other, trying to deal with stuff. And that took 45 minutes. Then when I would go back sometime later and try to use it, all the numbers and stuff I got didn't work. 2 weeks ago, and this was, my husband died in October of 2019. 2 weeks ago, I called Comcast to make a change in my service. They had no record of Marty's death.
Oh,
I mean, it's just as unreal.
It is.
And then the other thing was, I went into a bank and I said, we've had joint accounts, everything was joint accounts. I said, all I want to do is take Marty's name off the records. It'll be all in my name. I bought the death certificate. By the way, I got 6 copies of the death certificate, and it was actually more than I needed, because with some of them who want them original, sometimes they mail them back. So anyway, the bank said, oh, you have to close down your accounts and start all over new. And we had to go through this miserable process of, as though they'd never heard of you, and you have to check your finances, your income and all that kind of stuff, and go through the credit report. That was on a Friday. The next Wednesday, I got a call from the National Bank headquarters who said, you didn't have to close those accounts. You could have just,
oh gosh.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that drives you nuts. So then I had 2 checking accounts, and I thought about it for a couple of days, and I thought, well, why don't we just keep the second one, and I'll make that a joint account with my son and put some money in it. So if something happens to me, I'll still be, he won't have to see all the details of my paying bills in my regular checking account, but we can have that reserve where he'll be able to write checks in case of an emergency. So, I mean, it's stuff like that that drives you nuts. When your psyche isn't strong to deal with a lot of frustration.
Yeah.
And there were just frustrations all the way along. And then a couple of months later, after that incident with the bank, the Madison branch, the Benicia branch was closed. I went to the bigger branch in Vallejo to have 3 documents notarized. And I talked to the gal there, mentioned this, that, and the other thing. She said, oh, well, that period when you had that experience with the bank, that was when the bank was changing systems.
Oh, gosh.
This doesn't drive me up. But I gotta say, in general, the worst wasn't settling my husband's estate, because our situation was simple. What was so much work was redoing all my own stuff and reassigning beneficiaries. The key thing is make sure all your beneficiaries are correct. I had, for instance, on my teachers' retirement accounts for Wisconsin and California. Of course, I had put Marty for my beneficiary. So I had to go through all my own stuff and take him off as a beneficiary, talk to my kids about who gets beneficiary for what and why. And that was far more work. But anyway, it took me about 16 months to get most everything settled. But since the COVID came during that time and school districts were closed, my Wisconsin school district, it took 22 months to get an answer from them that they had finally changed the beneficiary on my insurance as a.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
how about you, Goon? Did you run into any complexities like this?
No, the only problem really was his account with Bank of America in Benicia. And I actually spent a week sitting in their lobby trying to transfer the money out of his account because I had been the attorney, a power of attorney on it, but they said, of course, it expired when he died. They had my signature on there. I brought the marriage license, a copy of the trust, the death certificate. And no, I had to go someplace else to get it notarized. And there was all kinds of ridiculous stuff. And it wasn't that much money. It was like his PIN money, and mine was across Safeway at the other bank. And then the joint account was down the street. But Bank of America, and I even showed them because when we lived in Oakland, we had been members for over 25 years. And I had this little certificate that we were good people, etc. Didn't mean diddly squat. So Bank of America, I'm not impressed with.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But it took a week, but everything else, no, really, I was basically done, I would say within two months.
Well, that's great. How about you, Mary Frances? I know you're still dealing with it.
I'm still dealing with it. I'm 2 weeks over 2 years. And of course, COVID shut everything down immediately after my husband died and locked me in the house.
Oh, gosh.
My husband would be shocked at how difficult it has been.
Yeah.
Because he and I thought that we had taken care of everything. The bank has driven me crazy. I used to use his account to pay all the bills. My name was on it, and I had a separate one because at the time when we were first getting things on the internet and what have you with the banks, each person had to have a separate thing. And I wasn't bothered. I couldn't be bothered to redo all the bill paying away from his. So anyway, after I paid off my house, they continued to take the money out. And it took forever. I mean, it's taken 8 or 9 months to get that taken care of. And then they canceled all my direct payments and nobody was getting paid. And I didn't know it till people started telling me they weren't getting paid.
Oh, gosh.
But anyway, so he would be horrified.
Yeah.
At what has happened.
Oh, my gosh, I'm sorry. How about do other people, anyone have questions that we haven't addressed or haven't covered? Do you all think you have your paperwork in order?
Well, one of the reasons for getting an attorney, you can get a will can be very simple. You can get a form for a will online and just fill it out and have it witnessed by a couple of people. But the critical one is a power of attorney. And what I didn't realize when I was sitting in my own estate was that it's not just the power of attorney, but there's all these extra things that you wouldn't know about. There's a form for special permission to do this and that and the other thing that the attorneys do know about. And so when it comes to the actual forms, they mostly go to some preset forms, but the attorney was able to adjust it. For instance, my concern was partly because I read the AARP publications when they come every month. And one of the things they'd emphasize is make sure your digital assets are are handled properly for your will, because what happens, somebody dies, nobody has a password. There's all this stuff in the background. You don't know what's there and what to do with it. So one thing I've made sure is that my son knows where all my passwords are. And I made sure that the will would specifically mention digital assets and what would happen to those.
Oh,
So
that's a
there's
good
things like
point.
that come with the modern age. And one reason that I had sent Judy a copy of the table of contents. This is my estate plan notebook. It is this big, and these are all the things in there.
All the documents she had.
And so my kids know where it is. It's in the top file drawer, right in front. There's everything in there. There's so many different kinds of things.
All these
You
things.
wouldn't,
That covers it.
but anyway, it's all in one spot. And so
Yeah.
knowing that we have that, then they, like my daughter-in-law brought one thing. She said, I want this put in there. It was a form to fill out when the point comes that I will need personal care. And it's a personal care agreement that you can sign and give them permission to make all the arrangements for whatever kind of help you need. Things like that I wouldn't have thought of. And if I see a helpful article in some place like an AERP magazine or online, I just stick it in there.
Yes, so it was Mary's extensive document that gave an example that I sent out just a little bit while ago to see all the many things that she uncovered and discovered.
But the most important one is Excel spreadsheet of my documents, bank account numbers and Ameripricing, and my list of what I call Mary Strauss, financial advisor, pastor of the church, insurance agent, doctors, retina specialists for my eyes, all that kind of thing. So I've got more darn lists, but they're all in one spot. And certain selected ones, since I have one son in Washington, D.C., certain selected ones, I have copies in separate copies. So
Okay,
we have the bare minimum to be able to.
thank you. I have also a spreadsheet like that. I have a couple of things that I wanted to comment on, as long as we have a few minutes. I was thinking about things that I didn't know about. When my mother was ill, I had to make a decision. My mother was 103. I had to make a decision about whether to have her go through surgery or not. And her she had fallen and broken her ankle in many places, and she was in extreme pain. And her orthopedist said he would never put his mother, if she was 103, through this procedure, because what her quality of life would be after the surgery. Her cardiologist thought my mother walked on water. So he said, oh, Judy, she could do fine. Her doctor, to my frustration, never called me back. And he never was in the hospital during the time. And I was going through such a decision. I didn't know there was such a thing as a chaplain in the hospital. If I had, I would have had someone to call and listen to me and help me think about it, and maybe get hold of her doctor. Anyway, that was something I thought, a simple little thing like knowing that there was a chaplain in the hospital would have really helped me. Let me see.
But one of the things that they have at Sutter and Vallejo, and I can't tell you about everywhere, but at Sutter and Vallejo, they have a palliative nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And I never managed to meet her. She came to my husband's room several times to talk to him. But I always missed her. But that would have helped you also.
Yes, I should say. Thanks for mentioning.
Judy, can I say one thing?
Sure.
As far as I'm thinking 7 on your side, Finney. does this remarkable work. If you're having trouble with Comcast and people that are your company that's paying your mortgage after it's been paid off, I mean, that's just unconscionable. But you know, they have a team of people that researches stuff and it blows it up, and other people come forward, and I mean, they could fix that kind of a problem,
Wow.
especially with these entities that they have no real staff of people that have these kinds of services or care. They just do rubber stamp. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? Anyway, I
Yes.
would suggest that. That's what I would do.
Thank
I
you. That's
have to tell
helpful.
you a funny thing that happened 2 weeks ago with the phone company. I've been trying to cancel my husband's flip phone. So now my husband's flip phone, which was a 3G, is out of service. And so they wanted to give me a new 5G one for him. So I went to return it. And I said, I don't need this. I don't want it. Well, anyway, I've been paying for his phone bill for the past 2 years because I couldn't get the thing stopped because they gave me a phone number
gosh.
within AT&T to call and no one ever answered the phone.
Oh, gosh.
So they gave me another phone number to call, and I called that number, and the woman said to me, well, why didn't you cancel this phone before? I said, I've been trying to cancel it for 2 years. And she said, well, I can only give you $100. I'm going to file a claim for you for $500.
Well, good.
So I am supposed to get $500 refunded to me by AT&T. Now, I didn't ask for that. The only thing I asked for was turn the damn thing off.
Oh my gosh, Mary Frances.
I mean, so these are kind of, I have a any of you know me very well, like Goon does. And many nurses have sense of humor like this. I have a very wackish sense of humor. And so, I mean, this kind of thing, as it gets away from me, as time gets on, I have very funny comments to make about.
That's great. That's a good thing for all of us to hear, Mary Frances. Keep a sense of humor. I just have one or two other things. When I was rereading one of these books over the last few days, one of the things it commented on that I thought was important to know is that funeral parlors are required to give you a quote over the phone. Mm-hmm. And I thought you're there under duress, you're trying to deal with things. I thought that was really significant. What if you wanted to do cost comparisons? You could call 3 different funeral homes and get that information. And the average cost, it indicated, was between $7,000 and $10,000. And what you're paying for is a casket, a burial plot, the open and closing of the grave, if you're having a grave, or the vault. Anyway, I thought I didn't get that before, and I thought that was important to know. And they're required to give you an itemized bill when you are meeting with them in the home. So that's just a little aside that was on my mind.
Well, if you're going to be buried in the Benicia Cemetery, you have to go to Parks and Community Services to get it set up. And you have to pay them. You don't pay the funeral home.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's good to know too. Anyone else, any comments you want to make about anything?
Yeah, we used the Neptune Society. I think by the time everything was done, the total cost was like $2,800. We both wanted to be cremated and had no idea, partly because we moved in 3 different states. If you're grounded in one community, it makes more sense. But for us, the Neptune Society made more sense, and it's competitive. But along the way, I saw a comparative sheet for, I think, all the services in our area that did cremation, and the prices are all listed right there. It was something like one of these organizations on aging through the county you could get. But my advice to everybody is to make things easier for your heirs after. It's so much work. It's such a hassle. Remember when we were in kindergarten, you were taught to clean up your own mess? Well, I would say when it comes to dealing with yourself, get rid of as much of your own junk as you can, because it's such a chore for everybody else. Keep your records, like your address list, in order. Take photos of your family heirlooms, your art, family photos, and instructions and your preferences for what to do with them or who will decide. Write your own information for your own death certificate, so it's there, it is accurate. Your kids don't have to scramble and get it wrong. Write your own obituary ahead of time and provide your own photo for your obituary. You can
Mary,
do a lot of
thank you.
that ahead of time. It saves a lot of grief and hassle.
Thank you. So we
Judy,
just,
I'd like just to comment that the series has been really excellent and profound, and all the work that has gone into it and preparing all the people to speak and moderating it. So thank you so much for doing this in
oh,
Carquinez
you're
Village.
welcome. Actually, that is what I would just like to ask quickly. If anyone has an idea, whether at the moment or in the future, what series, whether there's other series that you would like. I've been thinking about this because I'm kind of an advocate of moving the village and ensuring we have lifelong learning as a part of what we offer. So I've been trying to think of what other series might be attractive. I thought,
Judy, I think there's one thing that would be attractive, because people die and you have to go on
Right.
And how do you do it?
It's a
And how do you learn how to take care of yourself?
right.
And
good idea, Mary Frances.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
It's a
I
real
had thought of, what about, Greg.
One thing I'm interested in is we are all seniors, and we are a network, and I'm concerned about how do we deal with it when folks pass on. It seems to me that we should tip our hat, or at least acknowledge the passing of members of our organization, and there just doesn't seem to be a good way to do that. And I'm wondering,
Thank you.
figure out a better way of doing it.
Well, I'll think about it and see if we can.
And also another thing is that there's no real way of checking in on people to make, or do we still have that thing where we check in with people? Originally, when CB started, we had a thing where you would call, like you would be assigned to call.
Yeah, I believe that Janice, yes, I believe that would.
Yes, we're working on that. Yes.
Yeah.
You're going to do
Thank
it
you.
again?
Yes.
Well,
Janice's
it's-
group is working on it, right?
It lands in, we have a member services unit, and they're the ones who are responsible for these kinds of things, Greg. So Margaret, can you take that back to your?
We are working on that at the last meeting. In fact, I think I'm going to be in charge of the people to call people.
Oh, good.
So
Great.
there you go.
Okay. I was thinking of a series on the brain, because there's so much being learned, or a series on Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good idea.
So I want to ask if anyone has any ideas in the future, would you get to me and share your thoughts? Because I don't know that I will put it together. I have just gone off the board, but it does interest me. So I would try to be an advocate. I would put it that way.
Well, you deserve a break. You did a lot of work for this.
Well, I enjoyed it. It was, and thanks for being the guinea pig with this program. If we did it again, then one of the things that I would probably change in it is I would like to have everyone buy a book, and that we would use, like Libby Boatwright's book is not too hard to read, and it's not too long. And if we were all going through that together, I think it would have even been more valuable. Anyway, I'm watching the clock, and it's just about time. So thank you all for attending. Greg?
Did you?
Greg?
Yes, one quick question. Can you tell people how they can find the recordings that you're making?
Oh, they're on the website. Molly?
Barbara is sending out a mass email each time we upload. So look for that, and it will have the links on it.
And is it easy to figure out?
Yeah, all you have to do is hit the link in the, I'm assuming that's easy, right? If you get an email with a link on it, you can click on it and it will open up YouTube.
Oh, and that's about as easy as possible.
Yeah, it'll open up
So-
the specific video that we're looking at.
And Molly, so they're all there. I mean, all the ones that are there.
Yes.
So
I've
if
been
someone,
trying- Yeah, I've been trying to have her put the link for our channel. If you open that link, it shows all the videos. You can just shop. Or the second link will be the link for just this program.
if you have any trouble, again, if you don't have my email address, let me give it to you. It's JUDIEDONALDSON1 @gmail.com.
So Judy,
Yes.
pick up on what Molly was saying,
Mhm.
that when you follow that link the first time, you end up on our YouTube channel. And if you join, say you want to join our
That's
YouTube
right.
channel, then you will automatically get notified every time something is posted.
There's a problem with that.
Oh,
You have to, yes, you have to have a YouTube account. How many people here have a YouTube account?
Mm.
Okay, so you guys, yeah, you guys can subscribe. Nobody else can. But you can make yourself a YouTube account. It's just an empty account. You don't have to do anything with it.
so in the interim though, if you go to our website, you just click on that link and see any of the YouTube videos.
Exactly, exactly. But subscribing is a good idea, but you do need a YouTube account, and that's kind of a real catch right there.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thanks for bringing that up.
And thanks for